that would give you a little bit of a sense of a beginning, middle, and end. And given that a lot of you are likely to be interested in doing local or independent news, I kind of thought, let's just kind of focus on that. So what I tried to achieve last week, but obviously it got kind of cut and trapped a bit, and I felt like it was very fast. There was a lot of information I gave you last week. So if anybody's got time, I really would urge you to re-watch that back. And even based on the conversation today, it might even make more sense to you now that we've had today's session. But what I was trying to do was say and make it clear, it's very likely that if you go and work for Reach, Johnston Press, JPI, Archant, you know, these big companies, they own a lot of the regional news titles. Then, of course, you've got the BBC and the local democracy scheme. And then on the kind of other side is these independents. Now, you could start your own, you know, site, fine. But when you do, you're starting from nothing, and you've got to build that up. And the business model of them is quite, you know, it isn't easy. It is quite tricky. But what I tried to do was show you the revenue streams and the business models that are working for those independent sites. And as I said in the introduction today, what Nub News seems to be proposing is this almost like middle ground. So again, just to repeat, if you work for Nub News, you are paid £24,000 a year. So you're a paid journalist, you work for Nub News. But what he offers is a chance for kind of to own shares in the company. And if you bring in like a sponsored client, like, for example, a series of funeral directors, then you would get a bonus for that. So it's almost like it's not quite as safe and secure as working for, you know, Ed and working at Reach, but it's a lot more kind of money coming in every month guaranteed compared to starting your own business and starting your own journalism site. So it's kind of middle ground. So that was the first thing that I wanted to make clear. The second thing was that, you know, the sites and the people that are winning this journalism battle in terms of resilience and sustainability, they're managing to blend three elements, and that's the business side, the technical side, and the editorial side. And if we can manage to blend those three cogs, there seems to be a way forward. And now in this case, those three cogs, if you'd understood it correctly, you've got a journalist doing the original content, you've got the kind of the API, the interface, bringing in, pulling in adverts, well, content from Reed, from eBay, from Zoopla, from Nextdoor. That's kind of the automated element. And then the business side, the main revenue streams are kind of sponsored, sponsoring a whole site or sponsoring sections like the news section, or like a partnership with a big company like Co-op to create something like Co-op Chat, I think it's called. That's like a partnership agreement. So those are the main revenues that they've got at the moment, as well as a few kind of, you know, Google ads. So has anybody got any, before we launch into anything else, just I'd really appreciate just any reflections so far. Do you feel like the business side of things is completely over your head? Stop. Do you understand a little bit of what I've tried to articulate so far? Were there any specific questions from Carl? So I'm just going to stop for a second. If anyone's got any questions, just put your hand up or put it in the chat.
I was just going to ask, do you think that, I was just, when I was looking at where Nub News had worked, do you think it's more in sort of middle class areas that it works better? Because when I was looking into it, it seemed like obviously the only real area in the north was Cheshire, which is probably the North's most sort of affluent area. So do you think that it needs to be sort of like a middle class demographic for it to work?
That's a really, really good point, Bridget. Well done. I don't know if you ever saw Altrincham, an independent site called Altrincham Today, but I'm going back now about 10 years, but that was one of the first like independent sites to work, and he said exactly that. The reason this works in Altrincham is because people are rich and they can, the if you've got a boutique that's selling expensive clothes, then they're making a higher profit margin. They've got a little bit more to spend on advertising, and it's a bit more like worth spending advertising to get people in. So it's a really good point. There's every chance that it's easier in affluent areas because you've got all the things that go with that. You've got probably, and I'm generalizing, but more engaged communities, like more likely to vote, probably more digitally literate, more interested in like generally just in news, public affairs, etc., etc. Now those are huge sweeping generalizations. So you've got two things there that are already helping you, aren't you? You've probably got a slightly more engaged like public interest audience, and you've probably got a slightly more lucrative advertising potential. Does that mean that you can't launch in grittier areas? Absolutely not. And actually, there's a great example in Port Talbot, which is a community in Wales, where a lady actually did this news experiment for about 3 or 4 years because they had no newspaper at all. Super engaged, brilliant, and it worked really well. Did she crack the business side of it? No, she didn't. So I think we definitely do not want to turn our back on areas that are grittier. But what we're going to have to do is be a little bit more creative about how we do make money in those areas, because it's not going to be as easy. Good question. Great question, Bridget. Any more questions? All right, brilliant. So hopefully you can see the link that's in the chat. There's two things I've sort of put together. First of all is like the running order of last week, this week, and next week. And then the other one, which I really want you to look at now before I leave you alone, and I'll just share my screen and then you'll see it. And again, you're gonna have to help me out here in terms of like how to make this work, in terms of working in groups and things, because I don't quite know what you're all used to. But what I'm asking you to do, I'm asking there to be 5 groups. I'll just clarify who's on the groups. So the group 1 is Fatima, Aaron, Bethany, Alexi. 2, Harry, Bridget, Charlotte, Charlie P. Katie, Abby, Thomas, Ben, David, Oliver, Hannah, and Gemma. And then 5th, Sandra, Oliver, Sophie, and Chloe. So there's 5 groups. So each group has got one of these, which is a Business of Nub News pitch plan. So what I want you to work on in the rest of this session and then ahead of next week is to do exactly what Carl said, which is suggest like a patch to do and launch a new Nub News. And the reason why this is such a good exercise for you is because regardless of whether this moves forward with Nub News or not is irrelevant. What this exercise is going to train you to think about is new in a competitive environment. So it's thinking, I might work for Lancs Live, but who else is going to be covering this story? Is it Cumbria Crack? Is it the BBC? Is it a Johnston Press site? Is it Lancashire Post, Lancashire Telegraph? Who's on Facebook who's also going to be covering this story? And it's also going to help you to think about who's part of the network. So yes, you're a journalist, but who else is interested in writing stories, pushing out stories, the community around it? So even that alone is a really great exercise for you to do. So for example, your group. You're going to put your names, obviously, in here. What do you think makes Nub News different in the local news landscape? I'm just asking you to few comments in there that'll help me make sure that you've understood these kind of like this continuum of options that we've got going on the business side. We've got reach on one end, an independent hyperlocal on the other, and we've got a model like Nub News in the middle. So what is the difference between those kind of three models compared to the BBC? And then Carl mentioned some big challenges and opportunities for local news. One of them was about like local businesses having like channels directly to their own audience. So what is the purpose of local news anymore? So that was one challenge he mentioned. He mentioned the other one, which was about scaling stuff. So he's like, it was all well and good making it work in Preston, but how do you then scale it? So that was his second challenge. But you might have other things that you're thinking, like you've said, how do you reach audiences that are used to getting it in print, or who just watch the 6 o'clock BBC News? How do you reach those audiences? How do you reach really young audiences and get them excited about local news? So those might be challenges that you are interested in. And then hopefully you might propose a few opportunities as well, like there. So then I'm asking you to come up with an area that isn't already being run by a Nub News site. And they can be, Bridget, in the north of England. I wouldn't worry about that. Or we could go with our South Bristol patch, whatever. In your group, you need to think of an area. And then what I'm asking you to do, and this is exactly what Carl said, distinguished for him a CV that he would look at and a CV that he would not look at, which is, are you aware of the competition? And so you've got a patch, maybe it's Bristol South. Who've you got working there? You've got Bristol Cable, you've got the local news from Reach, probably an Archant title. You'll have a magazine, you'll have Facebook news groups, you'll have probably an independent journalism site as well. So let's list off the competitors in that area. And then he also wanted you to have a feel for all of the organisations that would basically be your trusted contributors. So they might be your local football teams, badminton teams, sports groups, guides groups, scouts groups, church groups. Like, who is it? Councillors, local services, local business hub. Like, who are all those people that might make your trusted team on the ground? And then what I'm asking you to do is look at some examples of the Nub News sites that are really good. Like he's mentioned Penarth, Penarth, Penarth. That was one that he said good. So now what I'm asking you to do in this section is, what content? Can you suggest some really good story ideas? Can you suggest types of content that you might scrape in and bring in, whether they're Twitter feeds, home listings, whatever? So let's think about what content you would have on that site. And then I want you to think about the revenue model. Now, he said that his main ones were, just to repeat, sponsored content, sponsoring the site. So that is someone who decides to sponsor the entire site. Then you've got advertorials. So that is when, like Fatima said, there's this slightly more blurred boundary between an advert and editorial. Advertorial. Now, he was talking about that in terms of content editorials. So it's a bit like you'd go to the florist, and instead of saying, put an advert, this is the name of the florist, this is the phone number. That's a classified advert where you've just got the name of the business and the phone number. But if there was a particular type of technique to wreath making on the run up to Christmas, and you were going to go and do that with the florist, and you were going to do a video of you practicing doing this wreath, and the florist is going to explain to you what the 5 best flowers are to put in the wreath, and you're going to do a 4-minute video on that, and then maybe you'll give a top 10 tips on making wreaths for Christmas. They are advertorials, and what you would sell is say, listen, for 100 quid, I'll give you the classified listing, but I'm also going to come and I'm going to do you a really nice video. We're going to do this little exercise. We'll do a Q&A with 2 people about what goes wrong and what goes right. And then we're going to do you some really nice photographs on Instagram. And all of that is a package. And can you see I've described it here responsibly. So I want you to suggest a few packages like that of what you would do with people to make it a bit more interesting. It's a bit like I said with the sweet shop. She can do that on Facebook, no danger. But what could you offer for a certain amount of money that would increase her brand, maybe do a really interesting, really quirky branding exercise with her that might be something that they would charge for. So I want some ideas about stuff like that. Then if you can think about business partnerships, have a look at the co-op. The co-op community chat is something that's a partnership between the whole of Nub News. That's not just one site, that's the whole of Nub News, and a big kind of national company like the co-op. Maybe yours would be, I don't know, it could be a Bernardo's or a charity or something like that. And maybe you could envisage a partnership between, a national business and Nub News and what that offer would be. Like, how would that work together? So that's what I'm asking you to do. If you've got time, just add on the bottom, like, how you would measure success. So it's almost like, what does success look like for you? Is it the increase of users on a website? Carl mentioned he wanted, 75% of the population every month on the website. Once he can get 30% of the local population, that's really good. But amazing would be like 50% of the local community on the site every day. That's like amazing. So that's a metrics of success. But you might also have a metrics of success, which is, 3 local businesses doing really great sponsored campaigns that are really creative, because you know that if you can get 3 of them at 300 quid each, then other local businesses are going to see how creative you've been with those like advertorials, and it's going to lead to more business. So maybe that would be a definition of success. Maybe your definition of success would be one amazing exclusive story, because you know that getting exclusive story a month is going to be brilliant for the site. So can you see how there's different ways to measure success? Some of them about business, some of them about content, some of them about growth. So that's kind of what I'd like you to work on between like the rest of this session and next week. And then I'm hoping that we'll kind of present those back. To put some sort of parameters on it, if you could do a 2 hours between now and next week as a group, that would be brilliant. We can easily come together at the beginning of next week's session and then have time when you all just regroup. And then what we'll do is use the second hour to present and listen to everybody's session. So it wouldn't have to be 100% finished by the beginning of next week, as long as it was kind of on its way to working. So then I'm going to stop and ask, does that make sense? Do I need to do anything at my side to facilitate those groups? Or do you have a way via WhatsApp or the channel or whatever, or can you just work inside those Google documents? So my main question at this junction is, how are you going to get together in those groups? And is that something that you're already doing, or is that something I need to do at my end? Can somebody, Chloe, can you just reply to me there?
My group, Oliver's been put in 2 groups. He's been put in group 4 and 5. So we've already made a group chat last night about, so we can just work in that. And we're going to meet after you finished teaching us to actually just start it today, so we can get it out, just get working on it really.
Brilliant. So your group chats where, Chloe?
We did it on Facebook.
Brilliant. Fine. So can I just confirm again? So is that right now, David? Sorry, Sandra, Oliver, Sophie, and Chloe. Are you kind of connected? Is that all right?
Oh yeah.
And then
I think. Sorry. More of the things I think is the fact that Ollie has been put in 2 groups. So what is he supposed to do?
I've just moved. I've just changed him. So he's in group 5 now, but not in group 4. So group 4 is David, Hannah, and Gemma.
Okay, David's not here, so it'll just be me and Hannah.
David, where's David?
I don't know.
Who's David?
David McIntyre, was it?
Yeah, he's not on the call. I don't know where he is.
I think.
Okay, fine. So what do you want me to do? So this is a question specifically for Hannah and Hannah and Gemma. Do you want somebody else to move into your group, or you're happy to just do it the 2 of you?
I mean, I'm happy to just do it the 2. I just thought.
Yeah. There we go, man. This is not graded. It's nothing else. It's almost see it as an exercise that's an extension of writing a CV, almost, because this is like an exercise in just having that awareness and how you articulate that to someone like Carl, so that you understand, you can show him that you understand revenues and you understand business side and you understand competition and things. So obviously it's not graded or anything, but it is a really valuable exercise to do. So it's whether you do it in 2 or 4 or 5 is fine. So is that, I hope this is interesting. I hope everyone's finding this interesting. It seemed better than just me talking at you. For you to do it in a really practical way and get work experience with Carl, or even a job, I think it's a really valuable thing to do. Has anybody got any more questions?
Yeah, just like a little quick question. What do the names in bold mean? Is there a reason that they're in bold?
No. They were just me. They were just don't take offense, anybody, but this was just in case I needed a spokesperson for each group, because I was just like, oh god, what if nobody speaks? So but as long as you can identify one person, or at least be prepared to join in a conversation next week. No, that is the only reason, Katie. I was just making sure that somebody was prepared to kind of represent the group next week. But you're all chatting to me now, so that's fine. I don't need to be worried. Fab. All right. Brilliant. Honestly, I can't extend my thanks to all of you for throwing yourselves into this task from very much a standing start. As I said, I hope now it's made a bit more sense about why we're talking about business and why we're talking about Nub News. And I'm really excited to hear what you've got to say. If I could just say one final thing, and that's, Carl's identified 3 or 4 revenue streams there around sponsored content, around partnerships with the business. But I really don't feel like he's unleashed himself as much as he could. So I would really, welcome some creativity here from any of you. Can you think of any way that these sites could make money? Nobody's got a rule book on this at all. And actually, on the contrary, I would say that the exciting sites for me are the ones that have gone, oh my God, like that business doesn't know how to go do Instagram. I'm going to offer, this to them, or that bookshop could do an amazing audio series on podcasts, and they've never thought about doing that. And I could do that for them, and they could pay me to do that. So let's just, really just throw caution to the wind. And think about any way that you can think of to make money and content and stuff. And I'm really excited to see you all next week. All right, thanks ever so much. Well done, and thanks for all your questions with Carl. You were super professional. Well done. I'll see you next week. Okay, have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.